This research casebook guide will show you how other students have set up successful research papers based off of the comic book The Walking Dead. I like to use a comic book to show you how to do this because we've read poetry, we've read some fiction and some creative nonfiction in the past, but we haven't really discussed, a comic as a type of literature. I say a comic book and not a graphic novel because the Walking Dead started off as a series of um, one, two, three issue comics. It is now one of the longest running comic series currently available. That's not quite put together as a graphic novel yet. Um, so I also like to show you guys a comic book because a lot of students get freaked out and they say, wow, I can write a research paper about something like a comic. And I say, well, yes, of course you can. Um, and using one of those literary schools of criticism that a lot of you will kind of be freaked out about, I will show you then how to apply these different schools of criticism um, to the subject of a comic. So I'm briefly going to go over what the case book entails before I go into some details. But as we start off, the opening talks about how to set up your research casebook too. So this assumes that you've read from the Purdue Owl how to actually approach a literary topic and some of the literary schools of criticism too. Now, again, the literary schools of criticism, you don't have to know all of them. You don't have to select multiple ones. You can go from a simple one like a historical approach, which we'll talk about in a second, and you can go to one that's a little bit more out there, like a deconstructionist approach. Those are all available to you, and you don't have to be, a literary critic with a capital C to understand how to actually format these questions. But the first step is to identify a problem worthy of research that applies to whatever text you basically choose. And for The Walking Dead, I've given some questions here about different topics that students have come up with and questions that they've formed and tied those to the different literary schools of criticism and the approaches that they used. The historical and structural are the first two, and that's actually what the student example that I'll go to in a second chose to write about. The student wrote about The Walking Dead and applied it to the Western genre. The Old West movies you see, and see how it's sort of a throwback to that. But of course, that's not all that you can do. You can go to magical realism. Of course, Walking Dead's about zombies. That's nothing more than magical realism there. You can go to a psychological approach, looking at the different characters and how their different psyches let us understand the Walking Dead. You do a feminist approach. Think about how the Walking Dead presents multiple female characters and often stereotypical gender roles, the damsel in distress, the temptress, the victor, and how these sort of fit in the stereotype or break it. And then, of course, there's the deconstructionist approach, which is how it takes the main stereotype of the single action hero coming to save the day, the Tom Cruise, the Chuck Norris, or someone else. God, I'm dating myself by saying Chuck Norris, aren't I? But the single hero going to save the day, and of course they deconstruct this and say that the group is key to survive. And that's just how these different schools of criticism questions came up with The Walking Dead. Of course, with your topic, whether it's a poem, a piece of fiction, creative nonfiction, or another comic, you'll use these different types of criticism and come up with one question of your own. So you'll pick one of these or a combination of them after you come up with it. And the step two is to present it in your own question, a topic proposal that we did before in the past. And the third step is your annotated bibliography, which you're going to begin searching for academic sources to support your argument or your counterargument. You have to explore the other authors' critical arguments about your topic in order to engage in the academic conversation, and you will have to use the Ole Miss Library database to support that search. And after the annotated bibliography, of course, you begin writing your research paper. So that's the main focus of this, and that is what we present with this research casebook. Below are some supporting materials. I've included the first 5 issues of the Walking Dead comic as a PDF. And essentially is this, going down step by step. And so, students read this, they respond to it just as you would with any other reading. And a comic isn't any different than a piece of literature. It's just combining the visual along with the story elements. I also included the MLA citation for it. And then we started to get into the issues of adaptation. Of course, The Walking Dead is one of the most popular TV shows on cable right now. But as I said before, it started off was the comic book, and the first adaptation was a digital motion comic. And I've included a link here too. And as I said before at the top, there's some secondary sources that my students have compiled, all from the library database, which your sources for whatever subject you are is also going to come from. And then the student paper about how the student used the research from The Walking Dead to apply it to this concept of an old Western tale. And I've included that as well up here. Walking Dead, a modern Western. So you can look at that and you can kind of understand the thesis and where she was going to and how she kind of compared that to the Western aspects of the story that she basically set out to prove in her argument. Okay, so secondary sources, there are a lot of them, and I've hyperlinked them all to our library database and given you the citation too. Doesn't have the web, doesn't have the date too. If you want to use any of these sources, if you choose to write on The Walking Dead, which you can, you'd have to fill that information in. But going down to the very bottom, there's Paul Pastor's one. I've already clicked on this, I've already loaded it up. And you can see that this is the PDF copy of it on our library database. If you go over to the right, we have our database tools as well. You have your link, cite it. You can save it to your computer. You can email it back to yourself. You can print it. You can zoom in to read it closely. And of course, you can go to the Cite Now feature, which over to the side looks like this. And you scroll down, we of course use MLA and Writing 102, and you have your MLA citation. You copy it, paste it, and integrate it into your Works Cited page. Okay. All the citation features are going to be available to you through the different library databases. They're going to look a little bit differently. A little bit different for each database, but they should have similar features for whatever database you're using that I'm showing you here with this. So we'll go back. Okay, so that's the basic understanding of how to set up just a casebook study, a research casebook study. And you're going to have to model this sort of approach to your own type of research question that you'd like to set up, and pick one or two literary schools of criticism that you'd like to use for it. And I really encourage you to sit down and talk with me so we can work on this one-on-one if you have questions, and do not delay, so that you can have a full understanding of what your approach would like to be for your poem or piece of fiction, creative nonfiction, or comic. Okay? All right, so I'll go ahead and end up the screencast here. And again, if you have questions, shoot me an email or stop by my office hours.